After losing his wife, Clint sank into silence, until the day he showed up with an 18-year-old girl whose parents claimed selling her was the only way to save her. The town whispered, judged, pointed fingers. But no one knew the real reason, behind that dark deal, or what the girl was hiding beneath her dress. The morning Clint brought Lily home, the entire town of Larkspur seemed to pause. He parked his dusty old Ford at the edge of the general store lot like he always did. But this time, a young girl stepped out of the passenger side, pale, wide-eyed, clutching a canvas duffel to her chest like it held her last ounce of safety. People stared, and Clint, once a man who greeted everyone with a nod and a smile, just walked right past them. It had been 9 months since the funeral. Since the cancer took Lorraine, his wife of 32 years, and left Clint moving through life like a shadow of himself. He'd stopped coming to Sunday service, stopped fixing things around the ranch. He stopped talking. But this girl, Lily, had pulled him back into the spotlight, and not kindly. There were whispers of scandal, even sin. People didn't ask, they assumed. Why would a man his age buy a girl her parents had given up? Behind closed doors, speculation turned cruel. Some claimed she was trouble, that Clint had lost his mind, that she was payment for something dark. But no one dared to ask the girl what she had to say. And Lily? She kept her eyes down, her voice quiet, and her hands close to the fabric of her long dress, where something hidden, something unspoken, was waiting to be revealed. The old farmhouse sat at the edge of the Wyoming. Prairie, quiet as a church graveyard. Paint peeled from its clapboard siding, the porch sagged at one end, and the windmill out back hadn't spun in over a year. But it stood, weathered, stubborn, and alone. Just like Clint. When they arrived, Lily hesitated on the porch steps. She clutched her bag tighter, staring at the wind chime swaying gently by the doorframe. A rusted horseshoe hung above it, half covered in dust. Clint didn't say a word. He just pushed the front door open and stepped inside. The air was thick with old wood and lavender, Lorraine's favorite scent, still faint in the hallway. Lily followed slowly, eyes darting from framed wedding photos to a worn recliner that looked like it hadn't been sat in for months. The silence wasn't just the absence of noise. It was something deeper. It pressed against her chest. "This used to be her place," Clint said suddenly, his voice low and rough like gravel. It was the first full sentence he'd spoken since they left the girls' town 3 hours earlier. He nodded toward a closed door down the hall. She used to read there, all the time. Said the light came in just right. Lily didn't answer. She set her bag gently at the foot of the stairs, unsure whether she was a guest or something else. Clint didn't give her a room. He didn't say when or what they'd eat. He just walked into the kitchen and opened the fridge, pulled out 2 bottles of water, and placed one silently on the table before walking away. Upstairs, the rooms smelled even more like the past. Lily picked the one farthest from the master bedroom. It was small, with a single bed and a faded quilt that looked hand-stitched. A cross hung crooked over the dresser. She sat on the edge of the bed and listened. No footsteps, no voice. Just the occasional creak of wood settling. Later that night, she padded barefoot into the kitchen. She hadn't eaten all day. A jar of peanut butter and a loaf of bread sat untouched on the counter. She made herself a sandwich in the dim glow of the stove light, her fingers trembling slightly as she spread the knife across the bread. Then she noticed the photo on the fridge. Clint and Lorraine, younger, smiling, and between them, another girl around her age, blonde like Lily, with the same narrow shoulders, but her smile was different, wide, open, alive. Lily stepped closer, her breath caught, the name scribbled. In black ink at the corner of the photo was Grace. Lily stares at the photo long after her sandwich grows stale in her hand. She whispers the name, almost inaudible. Grace. Clint's footsteps echo softly upstairs. He stops. Right above her room. Larkspur wasn't the kind of town that forgot things. It held on to every story like a dog with a bone, especially the messy ones. And Clint bringing a teenage girl to live at the old Collins Ranch? That was the juiciest thing to hit Main Street in years. At the diner, Forks paused midair when Lily walked in for the first time. Clint had sent her to pick up a bag of flour and coffee. Her boots clacked against the worn tile floor, echoing in the hush that fell the moment the bell over the door jingled. Behind the counter, Ruthie, who'd known Clint since high school, offered a tight-lipped smile. "You new in town, sweetheart?" she asked, voice too sweet. Lily nodded, forcing a smile. "Just staying with Clint Collins." The silence deepened. Even the fry cook peeked through the window. Outside, gossip bloomed like weeds. At the gas station, folks leaned close to whisper theories. "She's got to be some kind of mail-order bride," one man muttered. "Or worse," his friend replied. "You hear her folks sold her? Sold her." That last part was said with a kind of gleeful disgust, like someone savoring scandal for breakfast. At church that Sunday, Clint didn't show. Hasn't for a while. But Margaret, his late wife's best friend, sat through the sermon with her, eyes fixed on the empty pew where Clint and Lorraine used to sit, hand in hand. After the service, she cornered Pastor Riley. "Have you spoken to Clint?" she asked. Riley sighed. "Briefly, said he was fine. Didn't seem like it." "Do you believe what people are saying?" The pastor paused. "I believe we shouldn't pretend we know what happens in another man's house." Margaret wasn't satisfied. She remembered the girl's face, pale, guarded, tired in a way no 18-year-old should be. And something about her posture, the way she flinched when someone brushed past her in the aisle. It didn't sit right. Later that afternoon, Margaret stood across the street from the Collins place in her car, engine running. Lily was outside feeding the chickens, sleeves rolled up to her elbows. Clint wasn't visible. Just the girl and the birds and that endless stretch of dry land behind her. Margaret watched as Lily reached out to pet a scrawny hen. For a moment, the girl's face softened. And then, just for a split second, she looked straight at the car. Straight at Margaret. As if she knew she was being watched. As if she'd been watched before. Margaret turned off the engine, unsettled. She told herself she was just being cautious. But deep down, she knew something in that house was not as it seemed. And the girl, she was hiding more than just her past. The house didn't creak like normal houses. It groaned, like it remembered things it would rather forget. Lily's first few nights in the Collins home were sleepless. Each evening, she lay in the narrow bed staring at the ceiling, tracking the shadows as they moved across the room. There was something about the quiet that pressed against her bones. Too quiet. The kind of silence that made even a ticking clock sound accusatory. On the third night, the nightmares came. She woke with a gasp, tangled in the sheets, her throat raw from a scream she didn't remember releasing. Moonlight slanted through the window, catching the sweat on her forehead. She blinked, heart racing. Then she heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving up the stairs. Clint. He stopped outside her door, knocked once. Then, after a beat, pushed. It opened just enough to be heard, but not seen. "You're safe here," he said, his voice gravelly and low. She didn't answer. He stayed in the hallway a moment longer, then walked away. The next morning, Lily found a cup of tea waiting for her at the kitchen table. No note, no explanation, but it was warm and lightly sweet, exactly how she liked it. She hadn't told him that. She took it outside and sat on the back porch. The prairie stretched out before her, golden and endless. For the first time, she let herself breathe. But the peace didn't last. As she reached down to scratch her ankle, the hem of her dress lifted slightly. Her fingers brushed the raised edge of a scar just above her shin, a burn mark, perfectly circular, angry and red. She pulled the fabric back down quickly, glancing over her shoulder even though she was alone. That night, after Clint had gone to bed, she wandered the hallway. The door at the end, the one Clint had nodded to where Lorraine used to read, was ajar. She pushed it open. Inside, the room was preserved like a museum. A soft armchair by the window, a shelf of worn books, and a knitting basket still half full. On the windowsill sat a mug, dried tea leaves clinging to the rim, and beside it, a notebook, open, the last entry written in looping, elegant script. Clint asked me again if we should tell Grace. I said not yet. She's not ready. Grace. The name from the photograph. Lily stood frozen. The pen was still tucked inside the notebook, as if someone meant to return. And now a new question haunted her more than the nightmares. Who was Grace? And why had Lorraine believed she needed protection? Margaret didn't plan to go to the Collins house that day. She told herself it was just a drive, just a way to get some fresh air and maybe clear her thoughts. But when she saw Lily hanging laundry out back, the wind tugging at the sheets like playful ghosts, something inside her shifted. Curiosity turned to concern. She parked by the fence and walked up slowly, calling out a soft, "Hello there." Lily turned, startled, but relaxed slightly when she saw the older woman's kind eyes. "Clint around?" Margaret asked. Lily shook her head. "Went into town, said he wouldn't be long. Mind if I keep you company a bit?" Lily hesitated, then nodded. "Sure." They worked side by side, clipping shirts and towels to the line. The wind danced between them. At one point, a sleeve got caught, and Lily raised both arms to fix it. That's when Margaret saw it. A thick red scar wrapped around Lily's upper left arm, just below the short sleeve of her shirt. It wasn't a fresh wound. It looked like it had once burned deep. The shape was unnatural, an oval, almost like a bracelet melted into her skin. Margaret said nothing at first. She just clipped the next towel and let the silence stretch. Finally, she asked softly, "That scar, is it from before Clint?" Lily froze. Her hand lingered on the clothespin, eyes fixed on a spot far beyond the horizon. "Yes," she said, quietly. "Long before." Margaret nodded slowly. "It's okay. I won't ask if you're not ready." But something shifted in Lily's posture. She lowered her hands and turned slightly toward Margaret, as if wanting to say more. But the sound of Clint's truck, pulling into the driveway, snapped her back into herself. She grabbed the basket of clothespins, muttered something about going inside, and disappeared through the back door before Clint even stepped out of the vehicle. Later that evening, Margaret sat alone on her porch, staring out at the gathering dusk. The scar haunted her. She knew what old burn marks looked like, but this one was too precise, too intentional. It wasn't the result of an accident. It was a brand, and that kind of branding wasn't used on livestock anymore. Not legally. Not humanely. Not on people. Margaret pulled out her phone and opened her browser. She typed in a phrase she never imagined she'd search. Trafficking brand scars, United States. What she found made her stomach turn, and Lily's scar was suddenly much more than a mystery. It was a warning. The wind rattled the window panes that night, like fingers tapping to be let in. Lily sat cross-legged on the rug in Lorraine's old reading room, the notebook resting open in her lap. The pages smelled faintly of perfume and dust, memories trapped in ink. She had returned to it after Clint went to bed. Something about the words haunted her. "She's not ready." The sentence looped in her head like a prayer or a warning. And Grace, who was she? The girl in the photo? Lorraine's daughter? Clint's? She flipped through the notebook slowly, fingers brushing, margins filled with neat cursive. It wasn't just a journal. It was a map of Lorraine's mind. Quotes from books, notes from meetings, names underlined and circled. Then, halfway through, Lily found something that stopped her breath. A list. First names, ages. Some had check marks next to them, others were crossed out, and at the bottom, written in a slightly different hand, as if added later, Lily Monroe, 17. Escaped. High risk. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Her full name. Her age from last year. The word escaped. Lorraine had written this before she died. She scanned the page. Above it was a header. Safe House Candidate List. Beneath that, in parentheses, verified leads from Blue Lantern. Project. Lily had never heard of that before. But it sounded official. Hidden, protective. She flipped back through earlier pages and found references to trafficking outreach, survivor relocation, and rural hiding protocols. Lorraine hadn't just been reading in this room. She'd been doing something big. A photograph fluttered loose from between the pages. Lily caught it before it hit the floor. It showed Lorraine standing beside a van, arm around a young woman with short, dark hair and scared eyes. The woman was holding a child. On the back of the photo, scrawled in blue ink, Rosa and Mia. Taken in 2018, safe now. That's when Lily understood. Lorraine had been rescuing girls, not just one, many. She was part of something far larger than this, Sleepy Town would ever believe. And somehow, she had known Lily was in danger before they had ever met. Lily sank back against the chair, overwhelmed. Lorraine had tried to help her. But why had Clint never mentioned any of this? Why bring her here and say nothing, unless Lorraine had told him? And Clint had stepped in to finish what she started. Just as Lily reached to close the notebook, she noticed something in the margin of her own name, a faint, barely legible number. It looked like a date, but it wasn't her birthday. It was the day Clint had shown up in her hometown, the day he found her. The knock on Clint's door came just after dusk. He opened it slowly, wiping grease from his hands with an old rag. Pastor Riley stood on the porch, hat in hand, eyes heavy with something deeper than faith. "I figured it was time we talked," the pastor said. Clint didn't move. "I won't stay long. Just a conversation." Clint stepped aside. They sat at the kitchen table in silence for a minute before the pastor cleared his throat. "You know how much Lorraine meant to all of us. She had passion, heart. But sometimes heart can lead folks into things they don't fully understand." Clint said nothing. Pastor Riley leaned forward, folding his hands. "I've been hearing things, Clint, from parents in town, good people, folks who've been desperate and ashamed." "About what?" "They did, about what they had to do." Clint stared at him, unmoved. "She's not your daughter, is she?" the pastor asked softly. "No," Clint replied. "She's not your responsibility either. You could still walk away from this. I think we both know that girl brings danger. With her." Clint's jaw flexed, but he kept quiet. Riley exhaled, frustrated. "Look, I'm not here to judge, but the people who gave that girl up, they sold her," Clint cut in. His voice, low and sharp, finally broke the surface. "Let's not pretty it up." The pastor hesitated. "Some of them, they say they were coerced, that there was no way out. They came to me months ago, afraid. Lorraine was digging too deep." "Good," Clint said, standing. Riley rose too. "Clint, this isn't just about her. There's a group. People with money, reach. She disappears. No one blinks. But if you stir this..." Clint stepped closer, his voice steady and cold. "You don't know what Lorraine gave up to save those girls. But I do. And I won't let it end in this kitchen over weak men and stronger lies." The pastor backed up, eyes narrowed. "Just be careful. Some pacts once broken don't leave anyone standing." He left in silence. Clint stood at the window long after, staring into the night. The barn light flickered, casting long shadows across the dirt path. He didn't see Lily, but he knew she'd heard. Her light was still on upstairs. Later that night, Lily found a stack of manila envelopes hidden in a locked drawer Clint left slightly open. Inside, documents, names, faces, and on top, an arrest warrant, dated 3 months ago, issued under Lorraine's name. The first man showed up mid-morning, dressed like he belonged, jeans, flannel, ball cap low over his brow. But his boots were too clean, his smile too practiced. "Looking for someone," he said, leaning on the fence post like he had all the time in the world. "Young girl, name's Lily Monroe, ran off a while back. Her folks are real worried." Clint didn't even blink. "No one like that here." The man chuckled, slow and measured. "Well, word is she might be here. Folks say you've been generous lately." Clint stepped forward, hands in his pockets. "You might want to move along." The man stared a second longer, then tipped his hat. "We'll be in touch." That night, a second man came. He didn't bother pretending. Pulled up in a black SUV with out-of-state plates and sat there for hours, just watching. Clint turned off every light in the house. Lily was curled up in the reading room when Clint entered, her knees pulled tight to her chest. "They're here for me, aren't they?" she asked. Clint didn't lie. "Yes." Lily's voice was barely a whisper. "I thought it was over. I thought you saved me." "I did," he said, "but people like them don't let go easy. And people like your parents, they gave you away once. They'll sell you again if it suits them." She nodded slowly. Her eyes were glassy but dry. "Then I need to run." "You run, they win. You run, and this keeps happening. To you, to others." Lily stood. Her hands trembled. "Then what do we do?" Clint looked at her, really looked at her. "We don't run, not this time." But Lily wasn't ready. That night, while the house slept, she slipped out the back. The prairie swallowed her fast, the dry grass, the moonlight, the cold. She knew these kinds of men. You didn't outlive them, you outran them, or you disappeared for good. She made it to the edge of town by dawn, but as she sat on a bench behind the abandoned grain mill, her legs aching, she felt something under her dress shift. The scar on her arm burned. The metal tag she'd kept hidden, the one they used to track her, was still inside her hem, sewn into the lining. She hadn't escaped at all. A shadow fell across the bench. Clint stood there breathless, holding her duffel in one hand. But it wasn't anger in his face, it was fear. "They're coming," he said. "And this time they're not just asking questions." They didn't speak as they drove back to the house. The early morning sun painted the plains gold, but neither of them looked out the window. Clint kept one hand on the wheel, the other gripping the worn steering cover like it might tear. Lily sat stiffly, fingers pressed to the lining of her dress. Back at the house, Clint poured 2 mugs of coffee but didn't touch his. He waited until she sat down. Then he nodded. "Tell me." Lily stared into her mug. Her voice, when it came, was slow and steady, like someone telling a story from far away. "I was 15 when they started," she said. "Not just my parents, other families too. They said it was a program, that it would take me away, give me a better future. But it wasn't." Clint didn't interrupt. "They branded us," she continued, lifting her sleeve to show the angry red mark, "to track us. And if we tried to run, they punished us." She stood slowly, hands moving, to the hem of her dress. With quiet precision, she turned it inside out, revealing the small black chip sewn into the seam, no bigger than a coin, but unmistakably electronic. They called it a behavioral tag. It shocked us if we disobeyed. They said it was for safety. She laughed, hollow. "Whose safety?" Clint took the dress from her gently, examined the chip. "This is military grade, government tech. Some of the men were cops. Some said they were contractors. Doesn't matter. My parents signed papers. They got money, and I got taken. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the photo from Lorraine's notebook. She knew before she even met me. But she died before she could get to me. And then, you showed up. Clint finally spoke. She told me about the names, about the places. After she got sick, she couldn't go anymore. So I did. I found you. Lily looked at him, really looked. You knew what I was, and you brought me here anyway? He nodded. You weren't what they said you were. You were just a girl, like Lorraine said, someone who needs a place to heal. She sat, back down, the weight of it all pressing down on her shoulders. What do we do now? She asked. Clint's eyes were hard. Now, we burn it down. Every name, every deal, every file Lorraine collected, we send it to someone who can't ignore. As Lily reached for the manila envelope he slid across the table, she spotted the top page. A name leapt out, her father's, and next to it, a donor ID number tied to something called Blue Lantern Trust. Clint had always believed the land could teach you things, patience, pain. What it meant to sow something with care and wait, sometimes years, for it to bloom. But that morning, standing in his barn surrounded by copies of Lorraine's files, he understood something else. Some crops aren't meant to grow. Some need to be torn out, root and all. The plan wasn't flashy. It didn't involve guns or confrontations. It involved Margaret, an old scanner, and a contact Lorraine had buried in the back pages of her notebook, a retired federal agent named Jonah Pike. They scanned everything: intake forms, transportation logs, donor lists, medical records, fake, adoption papers, all of it. Lily helped, her hands steady, her focus relentless. She refused to let someone else fight for her. By the end of the day, Clint loaded a flash drive into a padded envelope and wrote a single sentence on the card inside. You owe Lorraine. Finish what she started. He mailed it from a town 30 miles away, less traceable, safer. A week passed, then 2. The men in the SUV never came back. The pastor stopped looking Clint in the eye. And one morning, as Lily fed the chickens, a black sedan rolled up. Not the same kind as before. This one bore government plates. Jonah Pike stepped out. He was quiet, observant, and polite. He asked for no interviews, no statements, just confirmation. And when Lily showed him the brand on her arm, he nodded solemnly. We've suspected, he said, but we didn't have proof, until now. 3 months later, headlines broke across national news. Underground trafficking network tied to private donor ring exposed. Over a dozen arrests, several more under investigation. Lily's name never appeared in the reports, but her story was in every word. Clint never talked about it publicly. He just kept repairing fence posts and feeding animals like nothing had happened. But every now and then, he'd glance toward Lorraine's old reading room and smile. That spring, Lily planted a small garden out back. Just a few rows. Tomatoes, squash, sunflowers. She said she wanted to grow something that didn't hide in the soil forever. Margaret helped her pick out seeds. On the day the first blooms opened, Lily walked out barefoot, sun on her face, dirt on her hands. She stood in the garden with her eyes closed, as if listening to the ground speak. Clint watched from the porch, arms crossed. You thinking of staying? He asked. Lily turned, grinning. I already did. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Lily bent down and placed something at the base of the tallest sunflower, the tag from her dress. No longer hidden, just buried.
If you've made it this far, it means this story touched you in some way. So don't leave without subscribing. It really helps the channel and keeps me motivated to share more stories like this. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And which part of this story moved you the most?